broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Greetings, folks. I'm Daniel Halad, Director of Development and Communications at the Northern California Community Loan Fund. Welcome to Pro Oakland, Outcomes, Learnings, and What's Next along International Boulevard. We're excited to welcome you to this peer learning event. Before I hand it over to my colleague, Catherine Howard, to introduce our panel and begin the program, I just wanted to thank our friends at JPMorgan Chase for their investment in this important work, and also to recognize our CDFI partner, Main Street Launch, for the expertise they bring to this collaboration. To prevent noise and disruption, your lines have been muted for the duration of this webinar. We will have time for a few questions at the end. I think we advertised 90 minutes, but we're going to actually try to keep the program around an hour for you. If you want to ask a question, please type it into the question window located on the right-hand side of your webinar box. We're going to curate a list of relevant questions for our guests. If your question wasn't answered in this session, organizers are also planning to forward a transcript of your answers to all relevant questions, so look for that in the email in the coming days. Without further delay, I'm pleased to introduce NCCLF's Director of Strategic Initiatives, Catherine Howard, who oversaw the Pro Oakland project and who will introduce the rest of the panel. Kat?
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Daniel. So thank you for joining us on this webinar where we'll be talking about Pro Oakland, which is a 3-year partnership between Main Street Launch and NCCLF, focused on the International Boulevard corridor in East Oakland. The panelists today are going to be Karla de Leon from Main Street Launch, Reem Assil of Reem's, California, and Jason Vargas from East Bay Asian Local Development Corporation. So before we get started in our discussion, I wanted to give everyone on the line a sense of the scope of the PRO grant and the sort of number-based outcomes of the program. So we were provided with a $2.1 million grant from JPMorgan Chase, which both Main Street Launch and NCCLF leveraged with other resources. Over the 3-year PRO period, our outcomes in terms of pure numbers were as follows. So NCCLF made about $17 million worth of loans to 15 organizations plus 2 grants, and had 36 consultations with nonprofit organizations along the corridor. Main Street Launch made over $6.7 million of loans to small businesses and provided over 6,000 hours of technical assistance. So with that, kind of as a little bit of a background on what the outcomes were, I'm going to ask Karla if you could start us off by giving folks some background on the PRO Oakland project. What were the expectations and how was it planned and what were we expecting to do?
Yeah, thank you so much. So Pro Oakland was a partnership between the Northern California Community Loan Fund and Main Street Launch. And the goal really was to support small businesses and nonprofits during the construction of the East Bay Bus Rapid Transit System, which it was or is a 9.5-mile corridor from San Leandro down International Boulevard all the way to downtown Oakland for the construction of a bus rapid transit program. And so the initial focus really was to sort of mitigate some of the construction impacts. There were a lot of concerns around transit projects and construction and how they can displace businesses and nonprofits just while the construction is happening. And so, we at Main Street Launch, we were charged with working with the businesses along that corridor, which we looked mostly at ground floor retail businesses, and that was over 1,000 businesses. And then NCCLF was working with the nonprofits on the corridor. And so we looked at other cities as examples of, things that we can be doing to support businesses as they're facing construction in front of their door. So we looked at Cleveland, Seattle, Los Angeles, and things that they did. And the 2 big things that sort of came up were needing to have capital to sort of make it through, just from a cash flow perspective, through the construction disruption period, and then also marketing. And so those were really the focuses for our work in terms of the initial goal of the program. And that changed a little bit over time, so I think we'll talk about that more afterward.
Yeah, and for NCCLF, we also knew that during the construction period, there was both sort of threat and opportunity for the nonprofit organizations along the corridor as well. So threat in terms of same things, having disruption, people not being able to get to organizations that provided services, just limited sort of accessibility and scope, and then also potential opportunities. So one of the things that we have been thinking a lot here about in the Bay Area is how do we help organizations purchase buildings if that's a reasonable thing for them to be doing. And so we thought of this as also a potential for opportunity for organizations that may want to be along that corridor to think about permanent homes as well. As it turned out, the BRT construction didn't take place along the planned timeline. And so we were in an interesting situation as a partnership where we had said we were really going to be working particularly around outcomes related to BRT and construction. And then, the construction didn't really start for a while. So Karla, could you talk a little bit about what this meant for the program and the partnership and how we, kind of rethought what we were doing in conjunction with our partners at JPMorgan Chase?
Yeah, so the initial construction timeline, I believe, was supposed to start like January 2016 and then be fully operational by December 2018. And that hasn't been the case. It's still not operational. Construction is still going on, and it's now set to be operational at the end of 2019. So we'll cross our fingers and hope that that's the case. But in the meantime, we still had this, still a lot of work that had to be done. And so one of the things that we started with was expanding the geography. So initially we were just working along International Boulevard, and we really expanded that to be East Oakland. And the reasoning sort of behind that is, all the commercial corridors in East Oakland are sort of interconnected. A lot of times you had business owners that had a storefront on International Boulevard, but then they also had another one on Foothill, which is just a few blocks up. And so, trying to look at East Oakland as an ecosystem, and also looking at other factors that might cause displacement and gentrification, which is a big topic of conversation in the Bay Area, particularly. And so Oakland is very vulnerable just given its proximity to San Francisco. And so that was something that we wanted to focus on, is just sort of how do we mitigate displacement in general and see this as an opportunity to make sure that the businesses that have been there for years and years can still be there and sort of promote, development without displacement.
Yeah, and that was a similar sort of refocusing for NCCLF as well on the nonprofit side. And one of the things that I think was interesting during the process of this program was for us to really think about, as you said, an ecosystem. So, with Main Street Launch being able to focus on businesses, because that's really the place and the work that you do and the place that you play, and NCCLF being able to focus on that nonprofit ecosystem and not looking at those as two separate things, but really saying, the international corridor and then later the larger part of East Oakland is really something where there's a symbiotic relationship between all of the people and organizations and enterprises that are already located there. And so how do we support those folks? And, for us at NCCLF, because we do focus on nonprofits, and nonprofits are some of the organizations that are the most vulnerable, particularly in the face of gentrification and displacement, we said, if we could work within East Oakland, and we were really, all of us were really pleased with how we could go back to JPMorgan Chase and say, look, this is kind of what's changed, but there are still a lot of pressures within this neighborhood. So how do we rethink, given what's going on with BRT, what is still happening in this neighborhood and how can we use this money successfully? Our focus on saying, okay, now let's just really think about gentrification allowed us to work with nonprofits that were really thinking about that were not necessarily located on International Boulevard. Now I want to switch gears a little bit after the background and talk a little about some of the outcomes of the PRO efforts and focus on a couple of specific clients. So Reem, I'd like to start with you. Could you please tell folks a little bit about your business and talk a bit about why you want to be in the Fruitvale area of East Oakland and how you see Reem's within the community context?
Awesome. Thanks for having me. So Reem's California is, in a nutshell, an Arab street corner bakery concept that was born in 2015 out of La Cocina. And our mission really is to build community across cultures, experiences, and generations through the gift of Arab food and hospitality. One of the things that, so prior to becoming an entrepreneur or food entrepreneur more specifically, I was working in economic development policy work. I was an organizer for a decade, mostly in Oakland, really focusing on building a voice for workers and residents, whether it be on the job or it be in their neighborhoods. And sort of later, sort of in the end of my work doing economic development policy, I felt very frustrated about how much policy on the books wasn't really informed or facilitated by community. And sort of my on the ground work, working with communities, I really built a strong belief that you know, communities know this, you know, in their heart of hearts, because they're the ones experiencing the problems, actually understand the potential, the solutions, and they have the potential to create those solutions, but they may not necessarily have the tools or the power to enact them. So I felt very frustrated in my nonprofit work because I feel like there does need to be an ecosystem, not just in the nonprofit, but we need to be building these different sort of touch points in which people are working together to uplift community, to be the sort of commanders of their own destiny. And so the fruit bill, so when I sort of built my concept of the bakery, I always knew that I wanted to have an anchor establishment in Oakland, a community that I have lived in for 15 years and wanted to set roots in, and to be able to show what could community-driven development look like. How could I show that? And Fruitville, I think, is a really amazing intersection of many different communities, nonprofits, businesses that have been rooted there for a long time, communities of color. I don't think that Reem's, I didn't envision Reem's as a solution, more of an extension of what was already happening there, and sort of imagined Reem's being a space to preserve that richness and the diversity of culture and experience in the area, and to really build that resilience through providing tangible benefits, right, whether it be through jobs, healthy food, or even just sanctuary space, which is something that, you know, we're seeing less and less of. So that's really kind of where I envisioned Reem's. You know, we always really see ourselves as sort of that anchor establishment that's rooted for the long haul, to be able to be sort of a player in an ecosystem that's already really vibrant, and helping sort of preserve it.
Thank you. So could you talk a little bit about your relationship with Main Street Launch, how you came to work with them, and what that work looked like?
Sure. Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that I was really, you know, when I was building my business, you know, really bootstrap my business for a long time, was this fear of, you know, taking on money or equity. For me, it's really important as a business of color, one that's rooted in social justice, to be able to take on partners that share my vision and values. That was really important to me. And so, you know, being able to, I had heard about Main Street Launch through Mission Economic Development Agency, who are one of my primary funders. And then just in talking to Karla, actually, she was the first person I had a conversation with. Just really, it was refreshing to see that there are folks out there that are really trying to build a different sort of, you know, development process. And I think I really meant without displacement focus. And yeah, and it was exciting to be able to partner with someone, not just in sort of monetary way, but also sort of in building the networks of people who are like-minded, because it's going to take a lot of us, not just one business, but a lot of us to envision what that development could look like. I think that Main Street Launch is not just a financial partner for me, but also a technical assistance partner, really helping me think strategically about how to really reach you know, my mission, and how to live up to my mission and vision. And so it's great to have partners that sort of hold me accountable to that. And, you know, they're really amazing thought partners. And yeah, just really lucky to have, I think that financial partners should be doing above and beyond just sort of giving the money, but also making sure that the businesses are successful.
Great, thank you, and I agree. So Karla, why was Reem's an important client for Main Street Launch, given the focus of the PRO program, and how does Main Street Launch's work with Reem compared to other work that you did along the corridor and in East Oakland?
Yeah. I mean, Reem is a rock star. I feel like I say this all the time. I feel like we can't take credit for anything. She's just a star. And so, you know, and I think, and I say that in sort of a way that I think that her focus on, you know, really building a community and an ecosystem in Fruitvale is really important. I think especially because she's a new business, right? There's a lot of vacancy throughout the BRT corridor. And so we want to make sure that you know, those spaces are being filled with people who want to be there, right? Who want to be part of the community and who want to, you know, help it develop and grow, and sort of maintain some of its great qualities, and then also, you know, develop into something that's there for everyone. And so that's why really Reem's is an important business, you know, from our perspective in that area. And I mean, it's also very different from others. And I mean, from the lending perspective as well, I think, you know, the PRO Oakland capital allowed us to take more risks, and sort of, you know, developing a concessionary loan program that, one, was lower interest, and sort of helped, you know, reduce the burden from a cash flow perspective. But also the underwriting was a little bit, you know, we could be a little more flexible with it. So other loans that we did on the corridor, you know, I think it's people that probably wouldn't qualify for traditional loans, but I hope that they were impactful, and especially those that were impacted by the construction directly. I think that the other thing that made them different is a lot of times they were very established businesses. So other businesses that I worked with had been in business over 10 years, right? So Reem, you know, Reem's is a new business, but we've also, you know, been working with a lot of businesses that have been there for a really long time. And so it's really nice to be able to see the differences in the ways that those businesses can support each other, and hopefully our capital supports them as well.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to use that as a segue into saying that we have a little bit of a demonstration that Karla is going to give us about a mapping tool that was developed with the PRO program that helped inform things like how many businesses there were, how, you know, getting to know how long businesses had been on the corridor. And so, Karla, if you could talk a little bit about the tools that we developed that helped the CDFI strengthen our outreach and strategy, that would be great. And I'm just going to point out to folks on the webinar that we are going to have some slides now so that we can show you a little bit of the images on screen.
Yeah, so part of the PRO Oakland grant was also for this corridor analytic tool. And really the goal of it was to visualize and map the BRT corridor before and after BRT construction, right? We wanted to get an idea of how the corridor will change over time, but also use it as a tool to sort of understand potential impacts for businesses. So one of the things that we kept sort of bumping up upon is the idea that really there's no sort of block level data, like individual business data. So we used a variety of different data sources, public and our own field work. And I say our field work, both Main Street Launch and NCCLF field work, to be able to layer data and get a more full, richer understanding of, you know, what that corridor looks like. So in our work, we verified 1,000 businesses. And when I say verified, this sounds really simple. Literally, we just walked up and down the corridors and made sure the businesses were there. That was the name of the business, that was the address, the phone number, and someone was there operating the business. Because no one actually had that. No one actually knew how many businesses were on the corridor, which sounds really simple. But it's, you know, it's a corridor that's largely in flux, you know, and so, and there's also some safety concerns, so people don't always want to go, you know, walk down the street, but we did it. And so we verified over 1,000 businesses, and then completed what we called needs assessments, or hour-long conversations with business owners where we asked them more. I'm so happy that they were willing to talk to us for that long. So we talked to about 305 merchants along the corridor, and NCCLF did similar work with 36 nonprofits, and there are just fewer nonprofits on that corridor, so it's not, you know, that's just the difference. So I want to start by just talking a little bit about some of the data that we layered together. So this is what you're seeing on your screen right now is a map of the city council districts in Oakland, just to give you a sense of sort of the size of Oakland in general from an up of a view. So that's the largest sort of geographic layer of data that we have. And then from there, we go down to the, these are census tracts, block groups actually is what they are. And the idea is we wanted to also map some residential data to get a sense of the relationship between residential data and, or residential changes and business changes. So the idea is that we'll hopefully be able to do, 2010, 2015, 2020 and see the changes over time from a residential perspective. So I think the data here is actually from the American Community Survey from 2015. And then we have the neighborhood level, and this is really the BRT corridor, the way that we looked at it. We used AC Transit's designations for the neighborhoods, so this wasn't necessarily, not everyone decides that Fruitvale starts at 23rd Avenue, but that's sort of how AC Transit designated, so we went with that. So the idea is we can aggregate things on the neighborhood level to sort of allow for some privacy as well. And then the next thing that you'll see is on your screen is basically this is sort of the nitty gritty of the BRT and our fieldwork data. And we hadn't really come across people that had this level of detail from businesses particularly. So what you'll see here is in the center of the street is the BRT, the infrastructure that was to be built, and we just took the construction plans and put them in GIS, and that's what that is. And then we also have parking. And then the gray sort of boxes that you see above are parcel data, so that's from the county. And so that'll include data such as zoning, even property ownership as well. So that's something that we can look at over time. And then each of these little dots is a business. So we collected all of this data, and this is just a little snapshot of this. So in front of High Street, there is this nightclub called La Frontera. And, one of the things that we wanted to know is, do people have leases? And a lot of businesses do not. They happen to have a lease, good for them. And their monthly rent is about $5,500. It's a very large space, so it's not necessarily an unreasonable amount. But so we collected this type of data, and also data in terms of business owner ethnicity, how long they've been in business, their levels of revenue, things like that. And then we also looked at parking. So parking was a huge potential impact, and probably one of the most contentious issues around the BRT construction was, parking that was going to be removed. Because a lot of the businesses, a lot of their business comes from people driving to the corridor, parking, going to their business and leaving. And that might be largely a result of sort of safety concerns where you don't want to park and walk 3 blocks just for safety reasons. And it varies along the corridor, of course. But so what you see here is any little square on the side in red is a parking spot that is to be removed. Anything in blue is parking that's going to be maintained. And if it's green, then parking will be added. So again, we just took the parking plans from the contractor that was doing the parking impact study. And then what you see in the red dotted lines are another potential impact. So this is something that we sort of came up with as a potential impact, left turn restrictions. And so really what this gets to is the ease of which people can access a business. So the one that you're seeing that's highlighted, basically people going down the street previously would have been able to make a left. However, now because there's a new median that's being built in the center of the street, people can no longer make a left. So in order to access that business from that cross street, you have to make a right and then go down and make a U-turn eventually. And so that's just a potential deterrent for people. So these are some of the things that we wanted to be able to show business owners, like, hey, this is coming, because one of the things that we found in our outreach was that people sort of didn't really believe that it was going to make a difference. And so having something to visually show them was helpful. And obviously down the road, we'd love to keep this up to date and be able to, sort of keep track of things and how things are changing over time.
Yeah, this mapping tool was really helpful for NCCLF as well. in part just for us to really understand what the impact was going to be for the BRT and for the traffic patterns too. And we had similar issues where, we will have a client that's a nonprofit that is doing some sort of social service that people need to access. And, they get there in a variety of ways. And again, many of them didn't really have an understanding of what was actually coming to their neighborhood, how that might impact them. And so when we were doing consulting with organizations and starting to think about, where did they want to be, where do they want to be located, we could have some context for what was the neighborhood going to look like in the future, and what was that in terms of what their needs were versus like what was going to be going on at the street level. So Jason, I now would like to be able to turn to you. And first, I'd love it if you could just please give folks a little background on your organization, Blvd.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kat. For those of you that don't know, I'm Jason Vargas, the Director of Real Estate Development with the East Bay Asian Local Development Corporation, and we're a 42-year-old nonprofit organization here in the city of Oakland, and our mission is to work with all the diverse populations of the East Bay to try and build healthy, vibrant, and safe neighborhoods through neighborhood development. Now, we also have a new approach to doing real estate development, which we're calling our Healthy Neighborhoods approach. And we took this on about 6 years ago, and it was born out of a study that was done by Alameda County Healthcare Department, where they took a look at the life expectancy of a child in the Oakland Hills and compared that to the life expectancy of a child in the Flatlands. And what they found is that there was a 15-year difference. So you were expected to live 15 years less if you lived in the Flatlands in the city of Oakland. And so the study went on to further identify 12 different reasons why, and things like access to education, lack of access to healthy foods, jobs, housing, and so forth. And so we've now incorporated that into everything that we do here at Blvd. One of the programs that we have here at Blvd, we're calling the Housing Acquisition Fund program, where we're going out and acquiring existing properties in the hopes of being able to stabilize the rents, and if not decrease the rents. What we were noticing was happening all across Oakland and East Oakland is that speculative developers were coming in, or investors were coming in, acquiring multifamily buildings, and increasing rents as high as they could, either legally or illegally. And as a result, we were seeing that our constituents were having to move an hour, 2 hours away from the city that they served. And these were nonprofit workers, they were restaurant workers, retail workers, public servants, and so we wanted to create a program or figure out a way to acquire these buildings prior to speculative developers acquiring them. And NCCLF, and both NCCLF and Main Street Launch have been great partners to Blvd. Specifically, NCCLF, they actually did provide, and I'm trying to remember the number. I think it's for our first 88 units, Kat, NCCLF did provide crucial funding, subordinate funding, interest-only funding, that did allow us to acquire our first 88 units in East Oakland. And the residents there are super thankful that we did actually come in, acquire the building. The previous owner of the building was in the process of trying to get people out and increase the rent. So it's been an amazing program, and we owe a lot to NCCLF to be a believer in that program.
Yeah, for NCCLF, we were able to invest in the Affordable Housing Acquisition Fund in part because of our work through the PRO program. And it was also just really important for us to, as we were looking in East Oakland, and for those of you who aren't from here or aren't local, East Oakland is a pretty built up urban environment. So constructing new affordable housing can sometimes be a challenge just because there aren't necessarily a lot of available parcels. And so as we were doing this work with Main Street Launch and thinking about East Oakland, we obviously knew, and across Oakland, even not just in East Oakland, that there was displacement pressure and gentrification pressure, and that was hitting not only the nonprofit organizations and the businesses along the commercial corridors, but that the folks who have been living in the neighborhoods and patronizing those businesses and working with those nonprofit organizations, we're seeing a lot of pressure on their rents. And one of the things that we were had this thought to say, to do so, but to really think about how do we get profit control and rent control as possible, as quickly as possible, as sort of an answer to displacement and gentrification. So that was a strategy that made a lot of sense for us in East Oakland, particularly in the context of the work that we were doing within the PRO partnership. And we were excited that we could find a willing and thoughtful and creative partner so that we could really think about how to kind of take on the issue of affordable housing along the corridor and within the larger area of East Oakland. So Jason and Reem, as a business owner and as an affordable housing community development advocate and developer, I'd like to hear from each of you is what do you each of you see happening over the next 3 to 5 years in East Oakland in terms of community development? And Reem, let's go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I am learning so much every day and sort of being a business owner and figuring out where my added value, like where I should be really focusing my energy. And I do think housing and jobs are hand in hand. They're so connected. I think as a business owner, I think the biggest challenges right now that we're facing is staffing. It's really, really hard to be able to sustain my business. And we're sort of, as a business that puts sort of workers first, our model is really built on paying workers a living wage. But even that living wage is, I cannot, even with us being above average, cannot really provide enough for people to live here. And so what we've experienced is lots and lots of turnover, and mostly because people can't afford to stay in Oakland. And interesting to me. I'm curious to hear more, and I'm glad that I get to participate in this webinar and be able to think about outcomes after and collaborations after. But I think that's going to be a real key piece of the development, is that more sort of social impact, values-driven businesses populate the area, and more collaboration is happening between the business sector and the nonprofit sector. It's going to need all of us. So I think housing and jobs is a big piece of the work.
Hung in. I think when we were last talking, we were talking about NCCLF and Main Street Launch continuing to focus on East Oakland, continuing to think and work in coordination and partnership. And I think what we will do is I want to talk very briefly about if there were other lessons learned from the last 3 years that you would think about that would be relevant to other communities working on partnership efforts around community development. Karla, I'll put that out to you first, but Jason and Reem, if you are still able to comment on that and have thoughts, that would be great. And I have some thoughts as well that we can wind up with. So Karla, go ahead.
Yeah, I think overall, like you said before, having NCCLF as a partner was great because it allowed us to sort of look at the ecosystem as a whole. We're, just like everyone else, sort of a little bit siloed in that we only look at businesses and sort of don't always have the deeper conversations that look at the interconnectedness. We think about it, but it's not something that we actively work on. And so it was a really nice opportunity to think about, like I said, the ecosystem overall and seeing how we can be more impactful. I think that we are more impactful when we work together, which I guess is the overall point of the PRO, the PRO partnership. And so, yeah, I think it's been great overall.
Yeah, and Reem, you talked a little bit about this, about the idea of housing and business and sort of a coordinated ecosystem effort. Do you have other thoughts on lessons learned or things that you think would be relevant to other communities working on partnership efforts? Oh, okay, I think we've lost Reem. All right, so one of the things I would say, so Jason, I don't know if you are there, but if you're there, do you have other thoughts? And this can come from your experience here and also your experience working in partnership around the city.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do think, and I think somebody mentioned this earlier, I think collaboration is key. I think there are the resources and so forth are here to make a big impact, but being able to advertise these or let people know within the community, especially within East Oakland, that these are available would be huge. I think it's a two-step process. I think number one, making people aware that it actually is available. Then number two, how do you access it? And then what do you do with it? And I think what you guys are doing is tremendous in that effort. Yeah, so those are kind of the big things for us, and collaboration in the sense that not only getting people together, but being able to kind of work together somewhat harmoniously. We have an opportunity here where we can look over the bridge, and we're 20 years behind San Francisco, and we can learn a lot of lessons of what to do and what not to do, and so I think really taking the time to look at that as well.
Great. Yeah, and from NCCLF standpoint, I mean, there's a few things that we've learned. We've always been an organization that's tried to work in partnership, and we've just seen the value more and more, and really are continuing to to couch our work in that way. I think also for folks who are particularly thinking about pro neighborhoods type partnerships, one of the things that was really important to us was flexibility, right? We had one plan, and knowing your neighborhood, like knowing the places that you're going to work. Like we had one plan. We were going to be working along BRT. There weren't a lot of financial resources stacked against the project for the neighborhood. So, our organization said that's what we're going to do. And once it changed, because of our knowledge of the neighborhoods, we could say like, well, what else is going on here? So instead of just kind of getting stymied, we could move on and say, what are the other forces that we want to take on within this neighborhood and this community? And then I would also point out that there is, I think, a real lesson to be learned around anchor organizations in terms of partnerships. So, Reem, is an anchor organization, I think, within the Fruitvale community. Another organization that NCCLF provided lending to, Restore Oakland, is going to be an anchor organization within that community as well. Blvd, has been a long-standing anchor organization within Oakland. And so kind of thinking about the value of anchor organizations and how they play out within communities and can really have, be more impactful than just being a restaurant or just being an affordable housing developer, and trying to find those partners, I think has been a real lesson for us too. Reem, I understand that you may have joined us again, and what we were doing is talking about lessons learned, and I know you had mentioned sort of an idea about the partnership around housing and employers and kind of creating that ecosystem. I'm wondering if you have any other thoughts on that would be relevant to other communities working on partnership efforts related to community development.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what I feel like sometimes is missing is the community members themselves. So it's like really amazing that you guys did all this needs assessment. There's just this amazing opportunity for organizing in the Fruitvale. It's such a robust community, and so what does development look like where community members are getting to have a say? And so whether it be partnering through nonprofits that have those bases. I know CASA, I know Restore Oakland, they bought that building right on the corridor. Partnering with folks who have a base, because I do feel like community should be central to this, right? And I feel really excited that as a space I get to provide free space for communities to meet and strategize and build with one another. We need to be building more spaces like that where we're not just kind of providing solutions for communities, but actually working in partnership with them. That builds sort of the longevity. So yeah, that's something I think about a lot. I think about it in terms of the physical space I provide, but what are the organizing opportunities there?
Great. So I know we have some questions from the audience that Daniel is going to provide for us. So we're going to try and curate some of those and give you a few answers. And then, as Daniel mentioned, we're happy to follow up on questions as well. So the first one was, how far off international does this data collection effort go? Are there other commercial districts covered?
Yeah. So this is Karla. I'll sort of answer this one. So the initial effort was specifically for International Boulevard and the BRT corridor. So what that meant is, International Boulevard from the lake up until San Leandro, and then 11th Street and 12th Street in downtown through Chinatown, and then up Broadway from 11th up till like 19th, 20th. So that was the initial effort. We've also, sort of taken this and, done it in other areas, mostly in Deep East Oakland. Some of the, not necessarily as deep of a dive, but some of the same business verification and vacancy mapping in Deep East Oakland. So specifically District 7, so the MacArthur Boulevard corridor, Seminary, and Foothill.
Great. Thank you. And there we had a related question asking if there was that going on in other commercial corridors as well. So another question was the Pro Oakland connected to the East Oakland Neighborhoods Initiative currently ongoing as a comprehensive climate planning effort in the area. So this is a neighborhood level community driven effort.
Is that OSME?
I think it may have been.
Yeah.
I think it's called.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we did a lot of coordination with actually a variety of neighborhood initiatives and efforts that were ongoing. So particularly even before we ended up coming together, I think both of our organizations were going to a variety of neighborhood planning projects, and then we have been partnering with several organizations that have been that are based in East Oakland that are working on neighborhood level initiatives. So we are not, PRO is not, directly connected in terms of like the funding is not directly connected with the neighborhood initiatives, but there's a lot of coordination on our part.
Yeah. I mean, the same. We try to participate in any type of, event organization group that we get invited to. So yeah, I mean, we try to stay involved as much as possible so that we know what's happening. And that's really, I mean, as much as we do sort of door-to-door outreach, I think also we have to utilize the existing systems that are already there. There's tons of organizations that are already doing good work. And so we can't reinvent the wheel every time and do it all, but we rely a lot on those local partners as well.
Yeah, I think that it's a value of both of our organizations that we understand that the people who know the most about the neighborhood are people in the neighborhoods, and how to be respectful with that, and to come in and say, we have some financial tools, and what are you all thinking about, and how is there a way for us to partner and bring these financial tools for you all to be able to, you in the community to be able to achieve the vision that you have for your community. I think that's how both of our organizations work. Another question was, through the PRO funding, were nonprofits seen as clients for lending, or do they assist in the distribution of funds? They were absolutely seen as clients for lending. So NCCLF's lending was all focused on nonprofit organizations. So of the 15 loans and actually 2 grants that we did, and over a little bit, right around $17 million worth of loans, all of those were with nonprofit organizations. And that was for the most part, for purchasing buildings, whether that be affordable housing, community facilities. So in the case of Restore, that's a social justice organization that's coming together and creating sort of a multi-tenant center and around restorative justice, and a training center as well. We also worked with a building that was purchased by the Oakland Community Land Trust that housed multiple nonprofits and community-focused businesses that have created a cooperative structure. So nonprofits were absolutely clients. And then, in terms of were they helping get money out the door? I mean, both of our organizations are nonprofits, so we were part of that ecosystem as well. So the next question is, does either Main Street Launch or NCCLF have plans to create or participate in the Opportunity Fund to invest in businesses and organizations contacted through this effort? Are you aware of other Opportunity Zone related funds that they could access? So I think the question would be, have plans to create or participate in Opportunity Zone. We actually do not at this point have opportunity, and I'll just speak for NCCLF, have planned to create an opportunity zone. You know, this is still relatively new legislation, and certainly we are been monitoring it and trying to figure out if there's a way to do what we call quote unquote high road investing. So investing that's really through opportunity that's really about you know, benefits the existing communities. I know the city of Oakland is thinking a lot about that. We have not found a place that we are going to be playing in at the moment, but it's something that we are certainly looking at and considering and trying to figure out if there is a strategy that makes sense for us. And
yeah, I mean, I think we're the same. We don't necessarily have a strategy for it right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's relatively new.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll sort of see how it develops.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the types of businesses that are along the, you know, International Boulevard corridor are not quite ready for any type of investment. They're generally doing revenues under 100,000, which is not necessarily what investors want to see per se. So that's something to think about too, is sort of, you know, what's the best for those businesses. And I know other organizations are looking at that and working sort of on that.
So Karla, question is, what were the specific lending needs of some of the older, more established businesses on the corridor?
A lot of them, so this is interesting. We saw this as an opportunity for businesses to sort of do a little bit of a refresh, right? A lot of the businesses that had been established have been doing business, you know, as usual, serving their current market for a very long time, and that was fine. And like I said, you know, doing revenues at or under 100,000 a year, and that's been fine. And so this is an opportunity for them to do some refreshes. So we did a loan for a nail salon that had been in business probably about 8 years, and she decided that she wanted, you know, this is an opportunity for her, since people couldn't really access the business. She's like, okay, I'm going to change the floors and get some new spa chairs for that. So we did a loan for her, and that was really for cash flow to sort of get her through those months of construction, and then also to do a little bit of a refresh. So yeah, so that's sort of some of the things that we look for in terms of the more established businesses, mostly for cash flow, working capital purposes, and then just, you know, cosmetic refreshes to their business.
So, you know, another question is, would this mapping tool ever be available for the public? We do not have it on any sort of cloud-based system, so it sort of lives within the office. We haven't really explored at this point what that might look like. I certainly understand how folks might be interested in that. It's not something that was part of our original planning. I mean, I think the idea was we would get some of this information and put it out in things like business directories, et cetera. But at the moment, we do not have a sort of methodology to make it a public tool. And with that, I think we had committed to getting you all out of here in an hour. So we wanted to thank you all very much. We apologize for the technical difficulties. We appreciate all of you hanging on. I want to say particular thanks to both Reem and Jason for joining us, as well as Karla. If you do have additional questions about Pro Oakland, please feel free to reach out and contact either Karla or myself. We would be happy to continue to have a dialogue with folks that are interested. And with that, thank you very much. Have a great day.